Go. Did you hit record?
Yeah, I hit record.
Go again.
Did I get brighter? Okay. Yeah, it's telling me. Okay, so hello, I'm Chris.
And I'm Wendy.
And welcome to our podcast.
Woo! All right.
I gotta go back to like our actual experiences in the woods. That one time we all went ghost hunting.
With a deer?
No, forget the deer. No, when we went to the quote unquote witch's house, when we're tromping through the woods, and this is like early into our experiences, we're going through the woods. It's pitch black. I don't know. It was probably only 10 or 11 o'clock, but unfamiliar area. It's in the woods. We're going through the woods and we come across this house that had been mostly burnt down, and it's just a shell of a house.
Could you hold on? I am listening to you so intently like I have never heard this story before.
You were
because
there.
I think it was so long ago. But I'm like, tell me everything. Okay, go.
Do you remember? I just remember when we were walking through the woods and all of a sudden, I mean, it's like, have you ever seen The Blair Witch?
Yes. Oh.
When we showed up at that house that was in the woods, that was like...
Yeah, you totally expect to find someone standing in the corner with their back to you. Like
I thought we were going to be in the corners.
Person.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. That's one thing I never, ever, ever want to run into as a homeless person. I mean, no. I'm sure that there are nice homeless people out there. It's just that... I don't mean, hey... I don't ever. No. I mean, like, in the woods.
Never ask me for money. No.
It's not what I'm expecting. I'm not expecting a deer. I'm not expecting a homeless person. When we entered into that place, and I remember, like, that is a legitimate, terrifying situation to be in the darkness, in the woods, in a place that you are unfamiliar with. Your family's at home, sleeping, and it's just the four of us. We make our way through, like, it's overgrown on one area. We find a doorway, and we make our way through, enter into this house, which is, once you get inside, gutted. Like, you can tell there's a fire or something, right? Because it was just...
Yeah, it seemed like it.
Right. Like, I don't even know how sound the structure was for us to have been in it. But I know that once we got in there and we started, like, actually engaging, we started doing an EVP session, your millimeter... Wait, was it a millimeter? No, you had a tri-field at the time. Your tri-field...
Yeah.
It was bouncing off the walls, and there was no electricity out there.
Oh, no. So just to explain it, this house was like, it's like it was a house that was, I don't know, built in the early 1900s, we'll say, and then not used for a long period of time. So like the whole wooded area had grown up around it. You couldn't see where a driveway was anymore. Like they had taken back their land, which doesn't take that long. Like in the South, but I think this lady that had passed away that they had accused of like being into some kind of witchcraft, it wasn't the early 1900s, it was more mid 1900s probably or something like that. But nobody had lived in the house for 10 years. It could have just been 10 years at that point, and we're looking at the early 2000s, and the trees had just grown up around it. So I drastically exaggerated when I said early 1900s. So take that out. Anyway, but the fact that like this is not a house that would have been accessible is just in the middle of fucking nowhere. You have to wander around in the woods.
Well, that was in an area that's close to is it a national forest?
It's definitely it's a state park.
It's a state park. It's a state park. And there's a lot of protected area over there. And it's funny hearing the local legends of that area, like Pigman. Do you remember hearing the stories of Pigman?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was so close to that house that we were at, which allegedly a witch had lived at.
Totally don't have any more to add to it than this. But that's also really close to the river. Like the Mississippi River flows not far from that area. And just to pick up on that water energy, like type element, that the type of energies that the water puts off and how it heightens the energy that the spirits can feed off of. It's about all that I can explain to you right now.
No, I want the scientific details.
I don't make you recall that shit right now. But it is really close to the river, though.
It
is. That state park is right on the river, and then that whole area, it's just not that far. So if that has something to do with it, it's putting off that those kind of vibes.
Well, not only that, not too far from that same area is the smokestacks that we went to. And there's a lot of lore associated with that area, but no real reason why it was so paranormally active. But there was so much shit happening there.
I think there was some, I don't know for sure, but I think it's got to have something to do with the energy flowing through there. The kind of energy that flows through Memphis and that kind of Mid-South area is kind of wonky.
Yes.
Okay. So round 2, we are via Skype for our podcast series that we're going to call Creatures of the Night.
We have a ton of stories to tell. We lived in Memphis together forever, and then we both kind of ended up on 2 separate parts of the United States.
Okay, so the premise of our podcast is that we plan on telling you a story, either sharing like a history from a place that we've been, or we just found this amazing story that you should all hear about. And then we're just going to kind of discuss, and we're only going to share one story, so don't get greedy, just one. We talk way too much for 2.
We do.
And the other doesn't know what story we're telling, so they get to react naturally to it.
That's what you think.
Oh, you actually do know my story, but because I'm not that original. Anyways,
no, my clairvoyant cat told me.
Oh, I forgot you had her. Anyways, we're going to share a story. I was Googling some stuff to try to find like the best story to tell you. And I was trying to find something you've never heard of, but I failed. But I saw this house in Florida, and it's called the Wonder House or whatever. And, it's just this random house in the 1970s that someone built that's very interesting, like stone walls on the inside. And it looks like this plantation home on the outside, but totally unique on the inside.
Oh my God, I love it.
Oh, and it also looks like they just built it in the middle of like, Palm Springs neighborhood or whatever.
No way.
Like, it's the total explanation of like people building the house too big for the neighborhood and like totally doesn't match, and somebody lost their fucking rockers. And it's empty as far as, I don't know how old this post was, but it's an empty house. And I was like, oh my God, I will buy it. But then you also
we have to go to Florida.
It's just fooling you, Chris. It's not really haunted with ghosts. It's just full of 70s people that are into ghosts. And they built like a station home and made it all weird and then couldn't afford it and it got foreclosed on. So anyways, maybe others have heard of this, and you definitely have because it's a place that we've been to. The Watseka Wonder House.
I love that place.
Illinois.
Love it.
And this was our first paranormal investigation, like our first formal paranormal investigation. We had been to cemeteries and we had been to residential homes, but this was the first time we ever had road tripped.
We could have a whole podcast about the feelings and the shit that went on there. It was insane.
Well, if you did, it would be 4 hours long. So I chose to tell the story of Lurancy, and I was going to Google how to say her last name correctly, but it's like Vennum. But let me spell it to you. It's Vennum.
Yeah, no, that's how I always said it too.
Okay, Vennum.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Watseka, Illinois was the first formal investigation we ever been to. It was in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Peoria, Illinois is where it was, right?
So we were in Watseka, Illinois, but close.
That's right, it was Watseka.
That's the name of the thing.
The tornadoes were in Peoria, right? Where were we getting the tornadoes?
Peoria is the next biggest town to Watseka, and it's a pretty big town in Illinois. So that was the roundabout where we were. But Roff, like field after field after field, and all of a sudden, bam, 3-story looking house in the middle of a cornfield.
It was country and then city shut down. Everything was closed.
There was like only a gas station open, and that was it.
And then it was like a neighborhood, and nobody was out.
I don't remember seeing other houses until we saw this house.
This house was in a neighborhood. It was like it was buried in the back, but it was early. The light was still out. The sun hadn't.
No, we totally got there before it got dark, and we probably wouldn't have fucking found it otherwise. It's a beautiful brick home. It's really huge, and we weren't allowed inside until like they had done their spiel outside. Yeah. And it was just nothing like any of the other houses around. So let me tell you the story. So July 11th of 1877, Lurancy Vennum was a 13-year-old girl who woke up that morning and told her mom that she felt dizzy and nauseated, and then she suddenly collapsed and fell to the floor. She fell in a mysterious, like, catatonic state, trance, during which she claimed, she fell out for like 5 hours. And then when she woke up, she claimed that she was able to speak to angels and spirits of the dead. These strange spells that occurred many times each day, that some would last for like hours. During these trances, Lurancy would speak in different voices, and she would tell of places that she should have no knowledge of. She's never been, and her parents didn't talk to her about it. When she snapped out of it, she claimed she didn't remember anything that had happened. Her parents were Thomas and Lorenda, and they were not into this kind of thing at all. This happened during the height of the Spiritualist movement. It was very popular, but they were not really into this whole Spiritualist stuff. They were very modest, traditional people.
What was the time frame again?
1877. So her parents pretty much disapproved of what could have been happening with her. Many other people that heard of her stories of Lurancy, they thought that her trances were her going into like a state where she could communicate with the other side, that she was developing her abilities as a medium. And and a lot of people around Illinois and Indiana had traveled to see Lurancy, and her parents was like, nope, negative. We just want our child to be normal and healthy. So they took her to multiple physicians, and doctors couldn't find anything wrong with her.
I mean, that's insane, right?
She wasn't having like any kind of fits or anything. They were just like, yeah, she's cool. She's just, I don't know what's wrong with her. And so that happened in July, and towards the end of the year, they told her parents, Thomas and Lorenda, that Lurancy she has mental illness, and you need to commit her to the state insane asylum in Peoria, the next closest town.
Right.
And her parents were like, well, we don't really know what else to do with her. We know what happens in these kind of places. We know that if we commit her, we're probably never going to see her again. But, like, she's not going to get better. But, oh well, I guess we don't have any other choice. So they wanted to get through the holidays with her, and then they had a plan, like, to say their goodbyes after Christmas and send her off.
Could you imagine being without your kids? Like, Merry Christmas.
I don't know what to think of these parents, that they were like, yeah, we know that place is kind of an but you know what? I guess there's no other place for you. You're fucking weird.
Oh, God. It's awful.
But I mean, like, she's 13 years old. So I'm sure it's very heartbreaking to them to, like, let her go. But at the same time, they're like, you know what? Teenagers are hard enough to deal with. I can't deal with your multiple personalities multiple times a day. So... goodbye. You gotta go. Like, I can't handle it. Like, I know that's rude that I'm saying that, but like, I don't know what else I would have done if my 14-year-old was acting bananas. I'd be like, oh my God. So before Lurancy was sent away in January, right after the holidays, right before they sent her off, Mr. Roff, which I will not say his first name because I don't get it. It's ASA. What would you say?
Asia.
Yeah. What a unique ass name.
And beautiful. P.S. I'm going to name my next cat that name.
I mean, but he just shows up at their door the next year, right before they send her off. and he's a Watseka resident as well. He's just been quietly listening to this whole thing unfold as everybody's like going nuts about what Lurancy can do. He's like, and just sitting back with his hand on his chin. And then when he hears that the family is going to ship her off to the state insane asylum, he's like, hold up. Let me tell you a story. So he shows up at the family's home and he's like, please don't send Lurancy away. I'm begging you. I know what this looks like. I had a daughter. She suffered the same condition. And
I love this man. I wish I could have. Are there pictures of these people online? Because I'd like to actually see their.
I didn't look that up, and I went down a long rabbit hole of stories after this, but I never thought to look him up. But he is kind of like a hero because he shows up and he's like, don't send Lurancy away to that insane asylum. Like, he tells them that he had a daughter that suffered from the same condition and that she died while in confinement at that state insane asylum in Peoria. So
does he ever mention her name?
He does, yes, but it takes him a minute to get there. He's just like, my daughter suffered from the same thing. She died while in confinement at the same hospital, and that her name was Mary Roff, and that he believed that her spirit was still with him. So the quick story on Mary Roff is that she is not quick, though. She was born in Indiana in October of 1846. Starting at 6 months old, Mary began to suffer from strange fits and seizures. Over the course of 19 years, they gradually increased in violence. As a young child, she complained of hearing mysterious voices in her head. She would go into trance-like states. She spoke in other voices, and she spoke about places she had never seen or had been to. So much like Lurancy, she was talking kind of in different voices and talking about places she had never seen. Mary could also kind of predict the future events. And she knew things about people in town and whatnot that they didn't think that she should know. They were facts about people and that they shouldn't be publicly known. And she did know them, which all sounds pretty cool. Like, she's totally like a medium and she can see the future and she's talking in these other voices and experiences different things. Great, right? Mary's like, she's having this cool life, like experiencing other people's kind of emotions, except for the fact that Mary tells her parents that she hears voices telling her to do things that she shouldn't do, like that she knows she shouldn't do, like hurt herself. She's obsessed with the idea of blood and getting rid of her own blood. So she will do things with like sticking herself with pens.
Right.
Or putting leeches on her body.
And that was common for the time frame.
Yeah. So she thinks that she's sick, basically. And she's like, if I just get rid of my blood.
Maybe there was advertisements on the telly for, sticking leeches on your body. Just like there is for Tylenol, right? You just...
Right. She was just
put
like,
it to your forehead.
I'm going to fix these fucking voices in my head. I'm just going to leech them out. No big deal.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be fine as soon as I get rid of this gross blood. So eventually the leeches and the pens aren't doing it. And she's got to escalate it to using a razor.
Oh.
So she starts cutting herself. And then that's why her parents finally were like, no, we need help. Like, they found her cut pretty badly in a pool of her own blood.
Oh.
And so they commit her to the state.
Do you know what age she was when all of that happened?
No. I do not have that down in writing, but I do not think that she spent that many years in the asylum before her death, which was only at 19, so.
Oh, so she was young.
Mm-hmm. I think she couldn't have been but like 16 or 17 before she was institutionalized.
And this is insane. The shit that's reported, the parents walking in and their daughter's like cutting herself up and she's like, I'm hearing shit. And they're just like, yeah. Call the goddamn psychic. Whatever, the doctor that's going to come in and take care How do you do that? How do you do that?
And I don't think that Mr. and Mrs. Roth were spiritualists until after the experience with their daughter. I think they were pretty normal, just doing their thing until it was forced onto them by their daughter telling, making such a impact on their lives by like telling them, I hear fucking shit and I'm seeing shit. I think the parents only became spiritualists after their daughter's death, I bet you. I believe that they believed that she had epileptic seizures that caused her to somewhat see things, and they thought that she could be cured.
Sure.
And I think they regretted not recognizing that stuff prior to her death, her parents.
Yeah.
And so I think after her death, they were spiritualists. Because they wanted their daughter back, and they also wanted to like make up for what they didn't recognize before. From what I get from reading about the history is that they thought their daughter had an issue and they sent her away when they couldn't control it and they were concerned about her hurting herself.
Okay.
So they sent her off to the asylum, and like so many others, she endured all the horrible methods of treatment that they had in that time. At the time that she went to the asylum, the big thing was water cure, where they put patients in icy bath and then move them to like scalding hot water afterwards to bring their body temperatures back up. But they were like trying to lower them and then bring them back up in like a fast pace. And then they would also wrap them in wet sheets. And then they would follow that by like vigorously rubbing them to restore their circulation. Don't really understand why they made them like icicles and then brought them back to life. And then there was this whole thing about cold water douches that I'm not going to explain.
Jesus Christ,
and
no.
I'm just going to say, what the fuck? I don't understand why your vagina has anything to do with your mental health.
Because people were fucking crazy.
Yeah, so she didn't do too well there. And
no. Who the fuck would?
It's not funny, but she died July the 5th of 1865 as she was hospitalized at the state mental asylum in Peoria. So, back to Lurancy. She was born on April 16th, 1864. So she was just about a year old when Mary died in the hospital. And her family only moved to Watseka when she was 7 years old. So this was like 6 years after what happened to Mary Roth. So the family claims that they knew nothing of Mary's story, that it had died down in being popular news by then. And so they had no way of knowing. So when Lurancy starts going into her trances and she becomes kind of popular around town, and then it becomes known that they're going to commit her to the asylum, and Mr. Roth enters the story like we were a moment ago. He convinces the family to not let her go to the asylum and before seeing his doctor, which is Dr. E. Winchester Stevens. So he's like super ashamed of that first name. If I had the middle name of Winchester, I think I would just fucking go by that too. Do you think that could be a girl's name?
What if his first name is Edward?
Edward Winchester Stevens. I think the Winchester is just more prominent than the Edward, so just drop it.
Just go with Eddie.
He wants to be cool, but he's a doctor, so he's going to be formal.
But it's so weird.
There are still some doctors that do that today, though. Drop their first name and just put like an initial. I know like 2 of them that do that. Who are they hiding from? I don't know.
Do you think E. Winchester Stevens, is that right? Or Stevensons?
Yeah. No, that's right.
Okay. So, did he have any connection with the Winchester Mansion, Winchesters?
I thought of that when I was writing it down. I was like, So he was an active spiritualist. You know that she was as well. What was her first name? Sarah Winchester.
She's from New England.
They were from that whole area, and she only moved out west because spirits told her to. They were like, keep going. And she was like supposed to get like a sign
when she
got that far well, I guess the ocean was a fucking sign. Like, I can't go any further. So
yeah, that's it.
You think almost, had she stopped in the middle of the country, it'd almost make more sense. But this is not Sarah's descendant. Dr. E. Winchester Stevens examines Lurancy with her parents there and Mr. Roth, and they monitor her while she goes into a trance. So the first spirit that they note that came through was a Katrina Hodge. Don't know much about her except for she was an older lady. And then a young man that had committed suicide, and his name was Willie Cannon. And then I had to note that I was super impressed with the fact that they got first and last names, because none of the ghosts that we ever deal with are that formal.
Yeah.
Like, we're lucky to get a first name, let alone a first and a last name.
True.
Okay. So she has two spirits that join her, Katrina Hodges and Willie Canning, which I'm sure their parents would have liked to know about that, but never mind that.
No kidding.
Mr. Roth was in town, and so he wanted to make sure that his daughter came through. So jackpot when they hit Mary Roth's spirit. Lurancy remained as Mary Roth in a trance for some time, and she told details of the Roth home and their family, and she didn't recognize her family, the Vennum family, at all.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah. Well, you could see where someone could make that up, where they could be like, oh, who are you? You know, and then like pretend to recognize these other people. But she took it a step further, as she knew the nickname to Mary Roth's sister. So like when they came up, like the mom, Mrs. Roth, and the sister came up, she called the sister by her nickname, not her given name, which apparently nobody else called her. And then, she continued that for almost 10 days afterwards. So on February the 11th, Lurancy was still as Mary Roth. And so the Vennum family decided to send her off to the Roth family. I mean, they were going to send her off to an asylum, so why not send her off to these neighbors' home down the street? She could still visit that way. And so they send her down with them, and they're like, okay, yeah, I mean, we'll just see how this goes, I guess.
Wow.
So she lived as Mary Roth for some time. She recognized all the family friends, and she had memories that only Mary should have had, like of homes. They lived in a different house when Mary was alive, and then they had moved to the home that they're in currently in this time frame. So when they passed by that house, Lurancy as Mary was like, hey, why are we not turning in? That's our house. And the Roth family has to be like, oh, we moved down the street. Like, this is our house now. So she apparently knew those type of things. She, like I said, she knew family, friends and families. She didn't recognize the other family at all, her actual family.
Wow, she
claims that she didn't. And she would go back and visit the Vennum family, but only with Mrs. Roth with her. And she made like friends with them. She felt comfortable with them and respected them and was very polite to them, but she did not recognize them as her parents anymore. So, but come early May, Lurancy as Mary told the Roth family, I'm going to be leaving you soon. And then the next few days were followed by like her doing emotional goodbyes to everybody. This is May, so it's been like 4 or 5 months, whatever, of her being Mary, Lurancy being Mary. And then a couple of days of her saying goodbye to everybody. And then after that, people reported that it looked like it was like an internal battle of Laurencia versus Mary and who gets to like claim this body basically, because she go in and out of trances and be Laurencia and be Mary at the same time. And she was very emotional and kind of like pissy about having to switch from one to the other. So eventually on May the 21st, Laurencia gained control of her body and returned to her family home. And she said goodbye to the Roff family. And some people claim that she still visits them, but she never, ever went into a translate state again. So she never like saw like other people's lives or were out any other kind of spirit ever again. And there's a lot of people that believe that Mary Roth's spirit kind of healed her from having that condition. So, of course, there were critics that believed that the Roth family just like devastated with grief that they had fed Laurencia with all that information, because Mary Roth's spirit only ever came through Laurencia until after Mr. Roth had visited and he could have gave information to Laurencia. And then after she left the house, Laurencia never had these like spells again. And she ended up marrying a guy that was like totally not into the spiritualist movement at all. And they moved away and everything. And she never talked about it again. It wasn't like a thing to her. So I was thinking of going to this investigation and what the case was about. And I wanted to see if there were any other cases of possession that were like this. But let me tell you this. When you Google famous possession cases or something, you're going to get nothing but demonic possessions like back at you.
Right.
So you get the Annalisa Michael and Roland Dahl, or the people that are like the exorcism and the stories that are based off the exorcism and the exorcism of Emily Rose and stuff like that. And those things happened around the 1940s, 50s, 60s, whatever.
Yes.
And like I said, this was the end of the 1800s. So I almost wonder when that spiritualist movement was going, was things like softened where people were like, oh, that's just a spirit that loves you and wants to come through. And then the mid 1900s, people were like, it's the devil.
You're right. It turned into, that's the devil.
You're possessed by a demon. But the cases of Annalisa Michaels, for sure, she was a very documented case of, there was physical signs of like her being affected by something and they had no explanation to why. And it was totally different than what Laurencia went through. But at the same time, so it got me thinking like, okay, so maybe they don't call it possession. Like maybe don't say famous cases of possession of spirits, which once I Googled that, I found this small article on people that thought that in countries that were less developed, that people believed that spirits possess the body of like abused children or something, which relates to what I'm about to tell you, but it was just a small little like snippet of information that didn't really expand on it. So I couldn't find much more. So it was like, okay, well, let's be honest here. If you're possessed by a kind spirit and it's not a demonic spirit, what might people interpret that as these days? Well, they might interpret it as a multiple personality because you are acting as totally different as someone else. And they blame it on mental illness. But what if it's something else?
Like demonic energy.
Or just any energy. Any energy taking over your body, and people don't know how else to interpret it but as multiple personalities. Oh, you're just behaving as different people to cope with the scenario. Well, come to find out, apparently there were documented cases, I did air quotes on that, of multiple personalities way before even Laurencia's time in the spiritualist movement. But I wonder at what point in time they decided this was multiple personalities. So there was a person named Mary Reynolds who was born in the 1985, and she lived in England. She moved to Pennsylvania in the States, and then she behaved a certain way, like she was very quiet and meek and everything in her demeanor. She got to about 19 years old and she hadn't married. And so she was considered like an old maid at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 months into being 19 or whatever, she went into a trance-like state. She slept for like, some reports say 8 hours, some say 18 hours, whatever. She fell asleep for a long fucking time. 8 hours would be normal though. But she fell into a trance apparently and woke up behaving totally differently. Like one report said that she woke up one time from a trance and she was blind and she was deaf. And then she recovered from that after sleeping. And then she went into a trance and she woke up and she couldn't read. And like,
I mean, what the fuck was happening?
yeah, I mean, like, she just would go to sleep for really long periods of time and wake up and she totally would be a different person. And people would be like, what is she doing? And then, eventually she, kind of woke up into this personality that was very vibrant and funny. Like they said she was hysterical. She was just like a funny, like woman. And she stuck into that personality for years. And she would stay in a certain personality for like 25 years and then fall asleep for a really long time, wake up and be a totally different person.
That is nuts.
Yeah. So they were like, Mary Reynolds, she has multiple personality disorder. Okay, that's odd. So then there's also this guy.
And when she woke up, what year was this?
That was in the 1700s, like late 1700s,
okay.
going into early 1800s, far before Lurancy's time. They felt like they knew what multiple personality disorder was, and that her going in these trances were multiple personality, but yet Lurancy's was spiritualism. You know, so like, what happened with the times where they change what they're talking about? But even after that, not far from Lurancy's time, there was a Frenchman named Louis Vivets. He was born in February of 1863 to a sex worker in France.
Okay.
They say he had a pretty rough childhood, so it led to like him doing like petty crimes. And he ended up in a house for treatment for teens, like bad teens. And then when he was 17 years old, he had gotten released from the house and he was working in a vineyard. Get this. He had a fucking snake wrap around his arm while he was working. A viper is what they said, but not bite him.
Wait, was he like customer service? Was he like with a receptionist? Like, I mean, so he had a viper wrapped around his arm. Okay.
Probably like cleaning out weeds or something. To get his arms down into the vines, he had to have been like a gardener.
Oh, so the snake wrapping around his arm was accidental, a part of his job situation. It wasn't like he just walked into work and he had a viper wrapped around his arm. And
that would make him the baddest motherfucker.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's like, you better recognize Frank.
Yeah, like they didn't have tattoos then, instead just held up his arm with a legit viper on it. No. I think he stuck his arm into a vine. Somehow a goddamn snake just wrapped around the entire thing. That sounds made up. But it led to him apparently going into convulsions and then psychosomatically becoming paralyzed the waist down. So apparently he's like, what the fuck just happened here? I'm paralyzed. I can't handle. So they send him off to an asylum and he spends like a year there. But then after a year, he can walk again, but he starts to act really like weird, like it's very dark, and they let him go. They're like, oh, you walk again and you're dark and creepy. Let's let you out into the real world. You're fine. You're strange, but you can work. So let's get you out of this hospital. They sent him out, and then he didn't do so well though. He was in and out of hospitals after that, and during like the 1880s. He was diagnosed with multiple personalities. That's when Lurancy's shit would have been going down at the same time, but he's over in France with his multiple personalities.
I'm digging this. this whole 1880s guy with the snake walks free.
He didn't actually do anything wrong, though. So they claim he has multiple personalities. They think they recognize like 10 different personalities in him, and that's it. That's where the story ends.
They claim he's got 10 personalities.
Yeah, doctors of the 1880s. So like you and me.
So this guy had 10 personalities in him?
Oh, also, it says, however, some experts believe he only had 3 personalities. So it's between 3 and 10, you know, somewhere between there.
Was his birthday in May or June?
He was
I just have to
Gemini.
know. At this point.
Can I say when he was born in February. Yeah, so no. He's
not a Gemini. That's fucking intense.
Yeah. So 2 quick more examples. There is Chris Sizemore, remembers that her split personalities began when she was just 2 years old after she watched a man be pulled out of a ditch because she didn't have like a traumatic upbringing like Louis did, the Frenchman. She just had a normal upbringing, but she happened to watch this man be pulled out of a ditch and she thought he was dead. And that was traumatic enough to spiral her into being diagnosed with what we know as multiple personality disorder, but what is more commonly known now as dissociated identity disorder, because they changed the name because apparently that helps in some way. So Sizemore didn't suffer from childhood abuse, like I said. She grew up in a loving home. She only had instances after traumatic events, which we know some mediums say that their powers or whatever don't happen or don't start to happen until they like experience some kind of traumatic event. So this happened, and after that, some strange events started to happen. She started to do some things, and then she wouldn't remember that she did them. So she would get in trouble for things that she didn't remember doing because I guess she was being kind of naughty. And then after she was an adult and she gave birth to her first child, and she, in her early 20s, she tried to strangle her baby. But at the time that she strangled her baby, she said that she was Eve Black, but Eve White stopped her from doing it. 2 different personalities. So Eve Black was going to strangle the baby, and Eve White stopped her from doing it. So she started seeing a therapist after that event. And
wow. And this is the 1800s?
No. This is in the 40s, 30s.
Okay.
I lost my piece of paper because it's back here. Sorry. It doesn't say, but it does say in the early 1950s she started to see a therapist, and that was after she almost killed her baby. She started to see a therapist, and then over the next 25 years, she worked with 8 different psychiatrists, and during that time, she developed a total of 22 personalities. Yep.
Holy shit.
And so all of these personalities differed in demeanor, age, sex, and even weight. Weight? How do you know what weight they are?
Was it like 1 pound, 2 pound? I would like to know because, I mean, I've seen some things on Pinterest, and it takes at least a week to lose 10 pounds. And that's, I mean, we're talking only eating eggs.
No. So years and years and years ago, I worked at Walgreens, and I worked the overnight shift, and somebody came up to me while I was working there, and they were like, "Can you tell me which is the best, like, antacid to buy?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, you should buy this." And like in the middle of me talking, the guy stops me and he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." He says, "Oh, you got a big girl voice." When I thought, you're a tiny little thing, because I am kind of petite, though I'm not skinny. But I was like, a big girl voice? What the fuck does that mean? So how does this Chris Sizemore know that she's a big girl compared to a skinny girl? However, she convinced psychiatrists that that's what was going on. And there was actually in 1957, there was a film, and I think there was a book as well that was called The 3 Faces of Eve. And it was like, I guess the actor that played her in that movie, like, won some kind of award.
Interesting.
So that was somebody that experienced no abuse, and it was just kind of brought on by a traumatic experience, where Louise, our Frenchman, he was brought on by traumatic experience. There's also a lady that grew up in New York State. Her name was Judy. I'm not going to tell you her last name because I'm going to say it wrong. It's like Castatella. She suffered physical and sexual abuse, and she struggled with depression, and she also reportedly had multiple personality disorder. She claimed to have voices telling her to hurt herself, much like Mary Roff's voices told her to hurt herself. So that's why I noted that story as well, because, you know, the catatonic state that Mary Reynolds would go into, the case from the 1785s, matched with what Lurancy would do. And then, well, not so much the abuse situation because we don't know, but Mary Roff had these feelings that she had to hurt herself, and there was documented cases of her doing that. And then I guess Louise had experienced something traumatic as well. So you can easily sit there and say, well, all these people that have multiple personalities, maybe something else is coming through. But there is a doctor out there as well that seems to think the same thing. Because I did find this very long paper that I had a hard time reading through. This whole long report that this motherfucker wrote. It's really professionally written and above my head in the language that he used. But what he brought out in the very beginning,
20 pages or so?
It was long. And it was Dr. Rogers in 1991 wrote an article about multiple personalities and channeling. So he was writing the similarities between, and he did believe that they were two separate things, that multiple personalities, because that's what they called it at that time, not DID. But multiple personalities was possible, but also trance-like channeling, like subconsciously, you didn't know what was happening in different spirits was possible as well. And he was trying to explain in these whole 20 pages how to tell the difference between the two, which I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to tell you that that I'm not far-fetched by believing that people with possible multiple personalities also have something to do with channeling other spirits in. So, the end. That's all I got for you. That was 3 hours long.
Wait a second. So there were people that studied this, and they've come up basically empty-handed?
No. This Dr. Rogers seems to really think that he has characteristics kind of outlined for whether the patient is suffering from multiple personality or suffering from trance channeling. And you just gotta look for the difference. But you know what? Those differences, they don't sound too fucking different to me. So
the interesting part of this whole thing is that Lurancy was channeling Mary. So she had doctors come in, and she'd have like envelopes with like letters or something. Like shit wrote down that like Lurancy wouldn't have any fucking clue as to what the fuck was wrote down in these envelopes. And for whatever reason, she'd be able to read them. Oh, were they letters to Mary that were in these envelopes? No, wait. I think I might be confusing that. I don't think they were letters to Mary. I think they were just random letters. She would be able to read the letters in front of doctors and witnesses and all other sorts of people. Lurancy was just sitting there, and she'd be able to read these letters unopened, completely sealed, from the person who sealed them. And that person had not shown this letter whatsoever to Lurancy. And she'd be able to read it, right?
I think that sounds more like what Mary could do, because Mary was clairvoyant. Or they claim that Mary seemed more clairvoyant. And Lurancy was just having, like, spells, basically. Like,
Lurancy was having spells, so Mary definitely was the clairvoyant, but she was speaking through Lurancy. Lurancy was just like a fucking kid. She's just like, I just want to have my fucking life. And Mary's like, wait, you, hold on a second. Are you sitting down? Great, because I want to, like, sit in your soul.
It did just kind of spontaneously happen for Lurancy, too, so you wonder, like, they're not going to tell you much, but like looking at these other cases of multiple personality, like what happened to Laurencia in that time frame that caused her? Did she see something traumatic? Did she hear something traumatic? Her family seemed like okay with letting her go. Were they doing anything to her? I don't want to suggest that. But like what happened to her that all of a sudden she was this great vessel for all these spirits to be like, hey, I gotta say something. Let me see through you.
Right.
And the house that we went to was Mary Roff's house. Watseka Wonder House is the house that
officially deemed the Watseka Wonder House.
It's where Mary Roth's family lived, though Mary Roth never lived there, but Laurencia lived there for 6 months or whatever while she was in that trance. That's not 6 months. So, I'm not doing math very good. It's like 4 months, 5 months.
This podcast is the no math zone.
I like it.
It might not be called that in the title, but just so you know, there's no math being done here. It's just late.
Random guessing. This is what happens when it's super late. You theorize and you run your mouth and you fire off into conversation.
So, it's late, and I don't even remember where we were right before I said that and clapped my hands. I should never clap my hands on this podcast again.
Maybe that's how we end it, though. You're like Thanos. Snap your... That shows that we're nerds.
Okay, I'll snap my fingers when it comes time to end.
No, so my point is I just wonder what was going on with Laurencia or Mary Roth. Do they have multiple personalities? Can it easily be explained away? Is multiple personalities a bunch of crock of shit? Is it really just possession of ghosts? We were talking about earlier this week, you and me texting, like how much work fucking sucks if we were like bad people in a past life and now ghosts.
No, I would never text about those things.
Might have murdered in a past life. Were they coming back and like causing the people in our current life to fuck with us and make like work horrible? So like what if that's it? That's the whole world is just controlled by spirits and ghosts.
It's easier for me to accept that Mary and Laurencia were connected. Maybe they were the same soul. I mean, we spoke offline earlier about how, having a past life and disappearing for a while because you have no recollection of years of the things that happened, but they disappeared from you. You only have recollection of that one life, like what happened to you. Back to that conversation, because it all connects to this story with Laurencia and Mary. If Laurencia and Mary were connected on that same path, that maybe they were just the same person all along. It would explain why Laurencia had the same abilities as Mary. But it doesn't explain why later on Laurencia lost them. I mean, Laurencia had a normal life. In the end, she had, I think she had children, and she moved on to she had a normal life.
But at some point, do they say, you free from that? Do they say, like, thanks for kind of acknowledging me, goodbye,
Yes,
we're good.
In this story, it happened.
That's the way that people implied it, is that Mary was like happy with the few months that she got to live her life and kind of say goodbye to everybody. And so, there's even one report that Mary kind of re-entered, Laurencia as she was giving birth to her first child, I guess to kind of take on the pain of childbirth for her. And so Laurencia never had to feel that. Like, I wish somebody was looking out for me like that.
And that's, honestly, that's what had drawn me to this story. After you had alerted me to it, I never even knew about this shit. I never even knew about this house that was sitting there in Watseka, Illinois. Never knew about it until you said, we have to go to this house. And I'm so amazed and so excited to this day that we were able to go and investigate this house on our own, because from what I understand, they don't even do investigations at this house anymore. Is that right? I mean,
from what I understand, they were just trying to build up enough money to kind of restore it back to its grandeur. And then they were like not going to do tours anymore. So they've done that. And I don't think you could even go there anymore. And we went on a night that was pretty fucking wild. There was like a
It was
tornado
wild.
going on.
That was the wildest part.
So it was pretty like, should we be leaving? Or, cause we had like a long ass drive back home. We didn't have a hotel room or nothing. So we were like, well, we might as well just camp out here. And so it was loud because it was windy. And I can't say that we got that much evidence. So we do have some EVPs.
We do. I remember being on the top floor after they had like a bit of a tour of the house. First of all, we showed up there early enough that we were able to see this place in the daylight. And it was crazy because it was at the end of the street, at the back of a neighborhood full of regular looking houses, I might add. They just looked like homes, like anybody was living there. And at the back of the neighborhood was this interesting home that was just like plopped in the middle of this land. It looked like it just didn't belong. And we roll up. And, they do the sign in, they do the tour, they do the grand tour. You go through the history of the home and the people that lived there. And of course, I had no idea of the story of this house until we got there, really, or before, leading up to it when you were telling me about it.
Yeah, because that was back in the day when we lived in outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and we would road trip to places, and it was like at least a 6-hour drive. And I think this one was maybe 7 to 8. And we would just like catch each other up on the history of the location as we were driving there. It was okay. So we wouldn't know until the day we were driving there what we were doing.
And they check us in. They tore us through the whole place. And then when we're in the uppermost part of the house, a room that faces the street. I believe it was the wife's room. I don't know what they called it, but they split the rooms.
They tried to say it was like a nursery or something, but
right. And we got to draw straws at that moment of where the team should split up. And because we had enough people with us, we were our own team. So when I was thinking about it, I wanted to end up in the deepest part of that home at the latest part of our tour, of our night. I thought that would be the most haunted area. And I drew the longest straw. So I got what I wanted out of that. And I remember, because you mentioned earlier that a tornado was just appeared while we're there. And it just seemed like a normal night. Like there was no wind. It was humid as fuck. It just seemed like any regular other night. And then all of a sudden, hey guys, going to be a tornado, in the area. So you should probably go in the basement.
Like, just kind of watch out for that.
And we're not ready to go in the basement. No one's ready to go in the basement because we have segregated our times. So we ended up leaving the upstairs portion of, we were engaged in like an EVP session with a spirit box upstairs, and then there's alarms going off and we have to move downstairs.
The tornado sirens going off. Yeah.
Right, the tornado sirens. Yes, the tornado sirens. God, I think I added an R to that. There's no R.
I'm sure don't ever hear where you live now. Neither do I.
So everybody runs. We all rush downstairs because we all want to be at the most center point of the house. I mean, Wendy and I are from Tennessee. We're used to dealing with...
yeah, this is a common occurrence between June to September, like in the South. Like, what sirens are, and you just kind of get to the lowest level and you hang out and wait until it gets real serious.
Right, and so no shit. I mean, I wasn't even scared. I was like, okay, here's another tornado. I don't know about everybody else, but I wasn't even scared. I just knew that everybody had, I was kind of fucking bummed out. Because it's like we're investigating.
It's interrupting our investigation. But to where it's supposed to put all this energy into the atmosphere and whatnot, we're like, oh, that'd be great if it would rain and stuff. But then we're also like, man, we don't need no fucking sirens like dictating which room we go to.
But we get downstairs and everybody, it's not just our team, but all the other teams are all huddled into what is, I don't know, the living room?
Yeah, like a back parlor or something.
Yeah, the back parlor. The piano was back there. And I had some kind of a meter. It wasn't the ghost meter, but it wouldn't shut the fuck up. You remember? It was going off. It was screaming. So I'm like, ooh, everyone's in this room and my meter is screaming. So I'm like, shut up, hitting everything on it. I ended up taking the batteries out. I'm still recording. I didn't stop recording because when the tornado sirens went off, everybody moves. You don't just like, hold on, hold. I have to shut all of my... No, you fucking move because it's a tornado. So we all went down at the same time. I'm downstairs dealing with this. And all of a sudden, I get this weird screaming noise that we called the raptor scream. Do you remember that?
Yes. On EVP, like on the recording, because we didn't hear it. And then it was like, I think
it was so bizarre.
When you put it on YouTube or whatever, like to put it on our website, that you said it was like, I don't know, like a baby crying or something, or a cat. But no, it sounded like a fucking dinosaur.
Yeah, it sounded like a raptor. It was like there was a mess of us, and we were all very calm. And I don't know what the people in Watseka are used to, or the area of Illinois. I know what Wendy and I and the group that we were with, I know what we're used to in regards to a tornado. And we don't like it, but we understand what happens. So nobody was screaming.
Kind of local, so they were comfortable. There were a couple of people that left, but they almost made it sound like they left because they were scared of the energy in the house, less about the tornado, you know.
Right.
So, but that house, I don't know if it gave us all that compelling evidence, but it definitely was a strange place. And like the basement of that house, which is what we were in, like towards the end of the evening or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I remember how fucking weird it was down there. So you walk down the stairs, and I remember there's a whole bunch of piping. So that was putting off our like I had a trifil meter. We didn't have a millimeter then, but like it was setting that off. So we were like, yeah, so this is full of a lot of the energy that might make us like kind of think otherwise. Yeah. So we went into this kind of root cellar almost, and we're standing in there, and there wasn't much going, you know, it was just a big square cinder block area. And that's where we stood. And I remember, I can't actually remember exactly what happened in there. But I remember people kind of seeing things or feeling like they saw things moving. Yep. And like we were definitely hearing noises in there. And like a lot of the people had left already from the house because of the storm and whatnot. And it was just late and people are driving home. And so it was like that, and right before the tornado sirens went off, that was when that place was the most intense. And we were like on the third floor when the sirens went off. And we were in that really big open room that I don't even know, like, traditionally what that room would have been in a house. But I remember sitting on the steps, and we were all like in like the four corners of the room. And just getting a super weird feeling. And I was even close to where the owner of the house, he lived there.
Yeah.
And he had like one room sectioned off for himself that like you couldn't go into, and he was in there with like his cat, and he was like watching TV and stuff. And I was sitting the closest to that, but I swear to God, that was the eeriest section of the house, is sitting near that hallway where there was a supposed bathroom that wasn't remodeled, and then where his room was. And I thought, man, I really thought that the energies probably hung out right there, because that's where all the energy that they can draw from was in that section of the house. And that's where the livelihood, that's where the owner lived. So they're like hanging out, waiting for him to come out of the room. Hey man, what's up?
They were comfortable with him. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I remember being in that bathroom and that being, no lie, the most comfortable spot in the entire place, the bathroom. I was perfectly fine there.
Bathrooms usually are, because they have like lights on, and they all look the same.
Lights, not the bathroom in Wood something. What was the place in Memphis called again?
Oh, the Woodrow Fontaine house. You thought that was creepy?
The downstairs bathroom I was perfectly fine in, but the upstairs bathroom, like immediately when I walked in, I felt like I was being recorded. It was a weird, creepy environment.
Weird.
I didn't even want to. It was so weird. But the bathroom at Watseka, I remember it was like being at home. Seriously, it was like...
As soon as you enter that space,
fine.
You're fine. But no, there was another bathroom that wasn't like... Well, maybe it wasn't a bathroom. Maybe it was a closet.
There was the spa,
Oh, look, it was like almost
cedar.
10 years ago, so I don't fucking remember. Yeah, there was a cedar closet. That was crazy. That was like it felt like a sauna in there. And that was like it was like a room in itself. It was so big. But do you ever sit in that closet? Yeah, I did.
And it was just quiet. It was nothing was happening.
Quiet and still and kind of a comforting experience, like a sauna.
It was comforting.
Like, you just want to lay down and enjoy and
chill out, yeah.
The air.
Right. I felt the same way, and I was totally disappointed. When I was locked in that room, I was like, I'm missing something. I shouldn't be in this room. Nothing is happening here. This room is, like, totally
Because they were saying that there was, like, weird vibes in there and to watch out and stuff. I think some people just are claustrophobic then. Because
I agree.
Those heightened spaces for us was that not the bedroom where women might stay with the nursery, but the bedroom behind that. So
behind it, yeah. Also, the kitchen that was directly underneath that. I feel like we got some stuff there.
That was a good space. And then the basement, and then that big open room on the second floor, third floor, whatever, that I was talking about. That was like, what is this space even for?
You're not talking about the space with the piano?
No. Upstairs, there was like bedroom, right next to each other. I can't remember. I don't think there was a bedroom on the other side, but maybe there was. But then there was a big open space, and you could walk down the stairs from there. And it was just
like a landing,
it was
right?
Just like a loft or a lounge area or whatever. It was like a second floor parlor. And because it was open, there was not an actual door to shut or anything. It was open on one side and then open leading to the hallway-ish area to go downstairs. And I remember sitting there, and maybe it was just because the sirens were going off then, but like I remember that space being like odd. I'm listening to this guy on the other side of the door living his normal life, but like also this space felt totally abnormal.
Were you separated from us when the sirens went off?
I was alone on that side of the room. Everybody else was on the opposite side, like near a window or whatever. I remember that.
I remember when the sirens were going off and everyone was like rushing to get downstairs. I remember that exact moment. I just don't remember who I was near. I remember, like, in my head visually, the stairs and the darkness and the heads. That's it. And then circling it and then going down further into the basement. I remember we were going into the basement for a moment, and then somebody said something, and we ended up coming back up to where the piano was, that area, and we ended up staying there.
Yeah, that was weird. They sent us all down to the basement, and then they were like, oh, you're not all going to fit down here. Never mind, just go up to the... I don't know what was going on.
Yeah, right.
They were like, well, that's going to be uncomfortable. Let's all go to this floor instead.
It's going to be uncomfortable. You know, you guys can all just die up
here. Yeah, no
cool.
deal. We don't really care about your safety because it's possible a tornado is really never going to come through here, so...
And you guys already signed waivers, so just, do your thing. But... The Watseka Wonder House was an amazing place. Like I said before, I hadn't even heard of it, Wendy, until you brought that to my attention and didn't even know more about it until after the fact. How cool of a place that doesn't even do tours anymore. Such a historic location shouldn't be owned by a person. That should be part of a museum property.
They actually, to give credit to them, they actually did what they said they were doing. the Watseka house, that they actually turned their profit into like, I'm going to make this a home. And then I'm going to lock the fucking doors and not let you in anymore. So. Rude.
I would love to have that home. And on that, we will say peace out, because I don't have another story to follow up with that. That was a really good story.
Oh, yeah. And a long-ass story at that.
Is it taco night?
Taco night.
So, adios, I guess.
Okay. Good night.
Farewell.